So, today we're going to be looking at using cited sources and how you can use those cited sources. So, the first thing to note is that using cited sources is something that's really important. You'll use it specifically for this paper. So, it's really essential that you get ready for this summative. But you're also going to use it in other classes. If you're going to college, you'll use it then. So trying to change your frame of reference and think, okay, this is really important. May not be the most exciting thing in the world, but it is really important information that's coming your way. So, first off, an original quotation, we sometimes call them standalone quotations. And it's just when you take something straight from your paper and you plop it from an outside source, and plop it straight up in your paper. And it would look something like this. Um, if you look here and you highlight the punctuation on your notes in column 3, so hopefully you have your notes open. And I'm going to pause right now and pause the video, and you're going to highlight all of the punctuation you see in the first row, column 3. Okay, now that you've paused, you should have noticed some things. First of all, that there are quotes at the beginning and at the end. And that shows quotes mean it's someone else's words. Okay, you'll also notice that there are parentheses around the end, which is the last name of the author, Warner, and then the page number, which in this case is 370. So the parentheses around the last name and page number. You'll also notice that the period after a more specific topic, the period right before that last quotation mark, has been shifted and it moves to the outside of the parenthesis. Now, I know there are other commas and there are other periods in here as well, but these are the ones that I really want you to focus on. Quotation marks and around the whole thing that's being quoted, showing it's someone else's words. Parentheses around the author's last name and page number, showing it's someone else's ideas, and the period that moves to the outside. So the next thing you're going to do is in column 4, so row 1, column 4, you'll see this quotation right here. And what I need you to do is I need you to put in the punctuation. The internal punctuation is fine, okay? It's more the same punctuation that we talked about earlier. So the quote is, when you need to recall something that you came across a while ago, you can go over the main ideas by looking over your notes. This is why good comprehensive notes are so useful. They are a catalog of the best ideas you've encountered and what you thought about them. Blackburn 2. So pause the video right now and put the punctuation right into your notes. Now that you have put the punctuation in, you should have a quotation mark before when. You should have a quotation mark after them at the very end. A parenthesis around Blackburn and an end parenthesis after 2, and then there should be a period after the end parenthesis. Now we're going to move on to the second row in our notes. And this is about introduced quotation. So when we write a paper, as I said earlier, you cannot use an original quotation, a stand-alone original quotation. It stops your writing. So the idea is you have your own ideas and the paper is flowing, you have lots of voice. And then as soon as you put in a quotation without any introduction, suddenly it halts your own voice and changes to someone else's. And that's not what you want. You want your paper to flow. So, to make your paper flow, one way of doing that is to include an introduced quotation. And this is first because this is the one that we're the most familiar with. This is the one that we do the most often because we're used to the ICE quotation model. So when you use an introduced quotation, you take your sentence that you wanted to use from the original source and you add some sort of introduction to it. So the author comments, the author finds, the author bemoans, right? There's some different samples on this in case you get stuck. And what it looks like is this right here. According to grammar textbook writer John Warner, analysis is the critical thinking skill that you use when you think about how a whole can be broken into its smaller parts. So you can see the sentence is the exact same. If you look at the sample from the original right above it in column 3, the first sentence is right here, but the introduction that's added is according to grammar textbook writer John Warner. If you can, if you know anything about that author, if you can include why that author is important, that is going to make your credibility increase. If you just say, oh, John Warner wrote this, you're like, oh, I don't know who that is. But if you find out he writes about grammar, he writes textbooks about grammar, suddenly, oh, yeah, well, he would know about analysis for grammar writing. And you only need the page number. Note that this one doesn't say Warner 370. And the reason is that you've already said the author's last name in the sentence. So because the author's name has already been listed, you don't say it again. You'll just put the page number. So what you need to do now is you need to go to column 4. And you're going to use the original column, the original quotation from above. Okay, and you are going to turn this quotation that you see into an introduced, excuse me, the directions are wrong in this, and turn it into an introduced quotation. Don't forget proper citation and punctuation. So you're deciding on how you're going to introduce. When you need to recall something that you came across a while ago, you can go over the main ideas by looking over your notes. This is why good comprehensive notes are so useful. They're a catalog of the best ideas you've encountered and what you thought about them. Pause the video right now, and in the 4th column of the 2nd row, take this quotation that's listed and turn it into an introduced quotation versus a standalone original quotation. So the next method of integrating quotations is a summary. And a summary is just like what you've been doing in elementary school, where you take something long and you make it short and you put it in your own words as you do that. So if I said, hey, I want a summary of Romeo and Juliet, right? You would take the story of Romeo and Juliet and you'd pare it down to 1 or 2 sentences. The same is true when you're citing a source. So maybe you have an article and it's a long article, and really the main idea of it is what you want. So you would write a summary. Or you have a long quotation and you're like, I don't need that much of it. I can put it in my own words and it'll flow better and I can make it much shorter. So in this case, you're going to still include the parentheses, the citation with the author's last name and the page number. But because you're putting it in your own words, you don't use the quotation marks. So what that looks like is you have your original quotation that's there. Analysis is the critical thinking skill that you use when you think about how a whole can be broken into its smaller parts. You use analysis in writing when you narrow a broad general subject into a limited, more specific topic. That long bit right there becomes analysis means to break a complicated concept into easier to grasp parts. See, there are no quotation marks because it's my own words, but it is not my own ideas. I did not come up with that. So I still need to have the author's last name and the page number in parentheses with a period on the outside. So what you are going to do now in column 4 in row 3, you are going to take this original quotation and you are going to summarize it. See if you can do it in 7 words or fewer. I bet you can. So see if you can do it. So you're going to take this whole thing, scale it back to 7 words max. Don't forget to include your citation. You won't need quotation marks because you're putting it in your own words, but you still need Blackboard 2 with the parentheses and the period on the outside. Pause the video and complete the summary, column 4. The next type of integrating quotations is very similar to a summary. This is like in elementary school. Remember when you would write something, hopefully it was way back then, hopefully you didn't do it in 9th or 10th grade, but you didn't want to plagiarize, you didn't want to steal someone else's ideas, so you turned it into your own words. Maybe you said, if it said, over there is the place to be, maybe you say something like, being over there is right? Putting it in your own words. So it's similar to a summary in that you are putting it in your own words. However, with a paraphrase, you're not necessarily making it shorter. You're just changing the wording, maybe the order of the wording, to make it flow with your own ideas in your own writing. So it's going to be about the same length as the original quotation that you're turning into a paraphrase. So for this one, you need to include the citation, the parentheses, still because it's not your ideas, but you don't need the quotation marks to show that it is your own words. So that's going to look like this. It's the same original, okay, but looking at the first sentence. Analysis is the critical thinking skill that you use when you think about how a whole can be broken into its smaller parts. You use analysis in writing when you narrow a broad general subject into a limited, more specific topic. Now, see, this is the original, the top part, so it has quotation marks, but now I'm going to put it in my own words. Analysis is breaking something down into smaller sections. It's used to limit a topic and make it more specific. I put it in my own words. I don't need quotation marks. It's still Warner's idea, so I still include the last name, page number with a period on the outside. So you are going to do that right now. I'd like you to just do the first sentence. So take this sentence. When you need to recall something that you came across a while ago, you can go over the main ideas by looking over your notes. Take that first sentence and put it into your own words. How would you say that same sentence? Then when you're done with that, don't put the quotation marks around it because it's not someone else's words, but you do still need Blackboard 2 to show it's someone else's ideas. So pause and complete that right now. The next and final step is a partial quotation. A partial quotation is when you use part your own words and part someone else's words, part from the original source. So when you do this, you are going to include the citation because it's someone else's ideas. And any words that you pull, then you need to include quotation marks around those. So this idea is very similar to an introduced quotation. But instead of doing a whole sentence, you're just pulling a part, a phrase, a couple words, just the most important parts of that original standalone quotation that you want to use in your paper. So that would look something like this. You have your original that's the same, and it becomes analysis is to consider how something can be broken into its smaller parts. So I just pulled broken into its smaller parts. That's the only part I wanted. And so because that's the part I pulled from the original quote, that's the section I put the quotation marks on. The rest is in my own words, so I don't need the rest of it. And it continues, it is used when people narrow a broad general subject into a more specific. So there's a weird comma thing there. Ignore the comma mistakes. It is used when people, the reason that people has brackets around it is because it originally said you. And I know I can't use you in a formal paper. So that shows that I've changed the original quotation. People often do that, like if they want to change the tense of something, or in this case, for example, changing you to something more specific. So I still need Warner 370 to show that it's someone else's ideas, and I have quotation marks around the words that I pulled. So note that what I pulled, though, is much shorter. So the last thing you're going to do is you are going to take one part of this original quotation, a phrase, 3 words, maybe 4, and you're going to take those words and put the rest into your own sentence. So the words that you pull should be in quotation marks, but the words that are your own ideas are not in quotation marks. You still need to include the citation, Blackboard 2, with the period on the outside. So this is your final step. When you have completed this, then you can submit it to Schoology. Thanks. Have a great day.